Well, Margaret Hoover is the host of PBS's Firing Line with Margaret Hoover, which airs at noon on Sundays, just before this program does. She's a CNN political commentator and has served in the White House under President George W. Bush, in the Department of Homeland Security, on Capitol Hill, and on 2 presidential campaigns. She's also the best-selling author of American Individualism: How a New Generation of Conservatives Can Save the Republican Party. Margaret Hoover, welcome to Florida this week. Nice to see you.
Rob, so great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about the convention. There were some interesting predictions made at the convention this week by speakers at the RNC. Vice President Pence said, you won't be safe in Joe Biden's America. And one speaker said President Trump must be reelected because he's the guardian of Western civilization. And our own congressman here in Florida, Matt Gaetz, said this.
They'll disarm you, empty the prisons, lock you in your home, and invite MS-13 to live next door. And the police aren't coming when you call. In Democrat-run cities, they're already being defunded, disbanded.
So, Margaret, there were some pretty harsh things said about what would happen if Joe Biden were elected. What do you make of those predictions this week at the convention?
Look, I think that 3 of the quotes that you just referenced represent part of the problem that we've come to recognize in our politics: the hyperbolic language, the broad brush overgeneralizations that are intended to stoke fear in the populace and aren't really grounded in any sort of fact or statistics or frankly reality, all tethered to reality. You know, you see it a little bit from the left, you see it a lot more from Trump's Republican Party. And, you know, it's unfortunate. There were some speakers this week who didn't do that, right? Who chalked a different course. Tim Scott was one of them, probably had the most memorable line of the convention, saying that he had gone from cotton to Congress in 1 generation, that his family had gone from cotton to Congress in 1 generation. Nikki Haley, who also represented a different strain of conservatism that really, frankly, stood in pretty stark contrast to the president, to the hyperbolic language that you're talking about. Yeah, there's no question that our discourse has eroded significantly over the last several years. That's one of the things I know you and I try to shed light on instead of heat.
So this week, too, the party decided not to have a platform. The president had a lot of family members speaking at the convention. What does it say about the central ideology of the party? Is the party still a conservative party, or is it a Trump party?
Look, I think it's pretty clear that Donald Trump, it really personifies the Republican Party. I think they didn't even try to put a platform together. I mean, it would have been one thing if they just, coronavirus and the logistics and all the delegates, and somehow there was a real excuse not to. But they didn't even feign an excuse. I mean, the point is that there's a real cult of personality around this president and around the Republican Party with this president at its head. And that's really, if you want to just distill it down to its most basic essence, I mean, that's really what you're seeing here in the party's choice not to have a platform. And that is a real disservice, I think, to Republicans and to the country, because the party platform, many people say, oh, it's just a piece of paper. Nobody really listens to it. Nobody really looks at it. There are things that I think most ordinary people are embarrassed about in both party platforms. It's a place where special interests in both parties go to, be heard and be have their small piece of the universe sort of taken care of. But it's still a document. It's a moment in time. It's a snapshot in time that tells us, you can go back in time and for the last 100 years, see where each major political party stood on any given issue for the last 100 years. And so it's a disservice to posterity, and it's a disservice to the party. It's a disservice to the country that they didn't go through that process.
You inherited the mantle of William F. Buckley. He was famous for standing up to the John Birch Society in the early 1960s and making the Republican Party more mainstream. What do you think William F. Buckley would say about QAnon and some of the other ideologies that have seeped into the Republican Party?
Well, listen, I I've taken up firing line in the last 2 years, but somebody who really inherited the legacy of Buckley and was Buckley's successor to National Review as its editor was Rich Lowry, who was my guest this week on Firing Line. And I posed the exact same question to Rich Lowry. And Rich said he would be appalled by it. And if you watch the program this week after your program, you'll see Rich take that answer. I mean, Rich rightfully points out, and he had written, that the GOP era Trump seems to have weakened antibodies against kookery. There's no question, since Buckley not only kicked out the Birchers, but kicked out, as he said, the extremists, bigots, kooks, anti-Semites, and racists from the conservative movement, and that was one of his proudest achievements looking back on his life and legacy. There's no question that he would be deeply troubled by QAnon and this particular conspiracy theory that seems to have more traction than other conspiracy theories, really, since the birtherism conspiracy theory.
Do you think that the base has taken over the party, and let's say the establishment, the intellectuals, the longtime politicians, like former President Bush and others, you think they've lost any sort of pull or sway in the party?
Look, I think the base has really shifted. I mean, the base always has extraordinary power, especially through the nominating process. The base and the dynamics of the Republican Party certainly changed with President Trump's election, because a whole 78,000 voters in 3 states that hadn't voted for Republicans since Ronald Reagan was elected. I mean, you're from one of them, Pennsylvania. They demonstrate, and they brought in a new energy, a new set of priorities, and a real realization that the Republican Party had perhaps left behind the working man, forgotten about the working man over the course of many years. So I think the base has shifted. I think the priorities have shifted. I'm not sure that the base has more power than it ever has. The base has always had a lot of power in both parties. But you're right, the traditional business-oriented, maybe Mitt Romney type of Republican certainly has less traction and less staying power in today's GOP.
Margaret Hoover, I hope you come back. I could talk to you for hours. Thank you for coming on Florida This Week.
Rob, thanks for having me.